Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Unraveled. Mitchell Becker had built his life like a fortress, methodical, calculated, and impenetrable. At 45, he owned 3 successful auto dealerships across the state, a testament to his ruthless business acumen honed during his 8 years as a Marine Corps intelligence officer. His wife Jennifer Weeks had been his college sweetheart, and Tyler Lawson, his adopted son, was now 18 and preparing for college. The suburban home in Millbrook Hills reflected Mitchell's success. Manicured lawns, a 3-car garage, and security cameras he'd installed himself. Old habits from his military days never died. Trust was earned, never given freely, and verification was always required. On this particular Saturday morning, Jennifer claimed she was visiting her sister Monica Dickinson in the city. Tyler had left early for his part-time job at the electronics store. Mitchell decided to tackle the spring cleaning Jennifer had been nagging him about for weeks. Tyler's room was a disaster zone of teenage chaos. As Mitchell moved the bed to vacuum underneath, his foot struck something solid. Hidden beneath was a locked metal box, military grade, the kind used to store sensitive documents. Mitchell's instincts, sharpened by years of intelligence work, immediately kicked in. The box was too heavy for documents. His lockpicking skills, rusty but functional, made quick work of the mechanism. Inside lay neat stacks of $100 bills, easily $15,000, alongside a basic flip phone and a small notebook filled with dates, times, and cryptic abbreviations. Mitchell's blood ran cold as he recognized some of the locations: parking lots near his dealerships, restaurants where he frequently conducted business meetings. The phone's call log showed dozens of outgoing calls to the same number over the past 6 months. As Mitchell examined the device, it suddenly rang. The caller ID showed only BH. Against his better judgment, Mitchell answered. "Tyler." A deep, gravelly voice asked. "The delivery is ready. Usual place, midnight." Mitchell remained silent, his military training taking over. Never reveal information unless absolutely necessary. "Tyler, you there? Don't forget, your mom's cut depends on this going smooth. Brian's getting antsy about the timeline." The line went dead. Mitchell stared at the phone, pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to form. Brian, he'd heard Jennifer mention a Brian from her yoga class. The money, the secret of phone calls, the coordinated schedule. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mitchell quickly replaced everything in the box and slid it back under the bed, but kept the phone. As he stood, Tyler appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Dad, I thought you were at the office." "Change of plans," Mitchell replied evenly, studying his adopted son's nervous demeanor. "How was work?" "Fine. Boring. You know." Tyler's eyes darted to the bed, then back to Mitchell. "Mom's not back yet. Still at Aunt Monica's." Mitchell watched Tyler's relief wash over his face. "Son, is there anything you need to tell me?" For a moment, Tyler's composure cracked. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed. "No, Dad. Nothing important." Mitchell nodded slowly. In interrogation training, they taught him that the most dangerous lies were wrapped in kernels of truth. His own son, the boy he'd raised, taught to drive, helped with homework, was lying to his face. As Tyler retreated to his room, Mitchell heard him making a hushed phone call. The words were muffled, but the panic in his voice was unmistakable. That evening, Jennifer returned home with shopping bags and a bright smile that now seemed forced. She chatted about her day with Monica, describing lunch at a restaurant Mitchell knew for a fact had been closed for renovations all week. As they sat down for dinner, Mitchell observed his family with new eyes. Jennifer's nervous laughter at his jokes. Tyler's inability to meet his gaze. The way they exchanged quick glances when they thought he wasn't watching. 22 years of marriage. 18 years of fatherhood. All of it built on what foundation? Later that night, as Jennifer slept beside him, Mitchell lay awake planning. In the Marines, they taught him that the most effective operations began with comprehensive intelligence gathering. He had 11 hours until that midnight meeting. 11 hours to learn just how deep this betrayal ran. The burner phone sat in his nightstand drawer like a loaded weapon. Tomorrow, Mitchell Becker would begin the hunt for truth. And if his suspicions proved correct, he would show no mercy to those who had dared to betray him. Chapter 2. The Moment of Truth. Mitchell spent Sunday morning acting the part of the perfect suburban husband. He made pancakes, discussed Tyler's college plans, and listened to Jennifer's animated story about Monica's new boyfriend. Every word felt like acid in his throat, but his face remained impassive. At 11:30 p.m., Mitchell positioned himself in his study with a clear view of the driveway. The burner phone sat on his desk, a digital countdown to betrayal. At 11:45, Tyler crept downstairs, car keys in hand. Mitchell waited 5 minutes before following in his other vehicle, a skill learned during surveillance operations in Fallujah. Tyler drove to Riverside Park, a secluded area near the old industrial district. Hidden behind a cluster of trees, Mitchell watched through binoculars as his son met with a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s. Brian Hagan was exactly what Mitchell had expected. Confident, predatory, with the kind of swagger that attracted bored housewives. The exchange was brief. Tyler handed over a manila envelope. Brian passed him a thick bundle of cash. But it was the third figure emerging from the shadows that stopped Mitchell's heart. Jennifer stepped into the moonlight, her arms wrapping around Brian's waist as they kissed with obvious familiarity. She laughed at something Brian whispered, the same laugh that had charmed Mitchell 22 years ago. Tyler stood awkwardly nearby, checking his phone. The family meeting lasted 10 minutes before they separated. Brian and Jennifer heading toward a motel on the outskirts of town, Tyler returning home. Mitchell beat Tyler home by minutes, settling back in his study with the lights off. When Tyler crept back inside, Mitchell was waiting. "Successful evening?" Mitchell asked, switching on the desk lamp. Tyler jumped, dropping his keys. "Dad, you scared me. I was just getting some air." Mitchell stood slowly, his imposing frame filling the doorway. "That's interesting. Because 30 minutes ago, you were getting cash from a man named Brian Hagan." The color drained from Tyler's face. "I don't know what." "Sit down." Mitchell's voice carried the command authority that had once ordered Marines into combat. Tyler collapsed into the nearest chair. "How long?" Mitchell asked simply. Tyler's hands shook as he stared at the floor. "Dad, I can explain." "How long?" 6 months, Tyler whispered. "Maybe 7. And what exactly have you been delivering to Brian Hagan for 6 months?" "Information." The words came out as a croak. "About your business meetings. Your schedules. When you'd be at which dealership. Sometimes about your personal stuff too." Mitchell felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "What kind of personal stuff?" "Bank statements you left in your home office. Passwords you wrote down. Your gun safe combination." Tyler finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I never meant for it to go this far. They said it was just." "They?" "Mom and Brian. They said they needed to know these things for planning." "Planning what?" Tyler's silence stretched until Mitchell stepped closer. The boy who had once been his pride and joy flinched away. "Tyler. Planning what?" "Your accident," Tyler whispered. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Mitchell felt his world tilt on its axis. Not just an affair. Not just theft. Murder. "Explain." "They've been planning it for months. Brian knows people. Dangerous people. They're going to make it look like a carjacking gone wrong. Tomorrow night, when you leave the downtown dealership. They know you always take the same route home." Mitchell's mind raced through the implications. The life insurance policies Jennifer had encouraged him to increase last year. The way she'd been pushing him to update his will. the sudden interest in his business schedules. And after my accident, Mom inherits everything. She and Brian are planning to sell the dealerships and move to Costa Rica. They already have a house picked out. And you? Tyler looked up with desperate hope. I thought maybe we could all go together. Like a family. The naivety was almost touching. Almost. Did you really think, Mitchell said softly, that after they killed me, they'd keep you around as a witness? Tyler's face went white as the full realization hit him. They wouldn't. Son, you've been working for people planning to murder your father. What exactly did you think your life expectancy was after I was gone? For the first time, Tyler seemed to grasp the magnitude of his situation. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll help you stop them. I'll tell the police everything. Mitchell studied the young man who had called him Dad for 18 years. The boy he'd taught to ride a bike, helped with algebra homework, cheered for at baseball games. The same boy who had just confessed to helping plan his murder. Tyler, Mitchell said quietly, there are some things that can't be forgiven. But Dad, you made your choice 6 months ago. Every meeting, every piece of information, every dollar you took. You chose them over me. Mitchell walked to the window, looking out at the suburban paradise that had been built on lies. Now you'll live with that choice. What are you going to do? Mitchell turned back to face his son, and Tyler shrank away from the cold calculation in his eyes. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, with a few modifications of my own. I don't understand. You will. Mitchell moved toward the door, then paused. Tyler, pack a bag. You won't be living here much longer. As Mitchell climbed the stairs to the bedroom where his wife lay sleeping, his mind was already working through the tactical requirements. Jennifer and Brian wanted him dead by tomorrow night. They would get their wish, in a manner of speaking. But first, Mitchell Becker was going to show them what happened when someone tried to kill a man trained in psychological warfare. The game had begun, and Mitchell intended to win. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Mitchell woke before dawn, Jennifer still sleeping peacefully beside him. Looking at her face, the same face he'd kissed on their wedding day, he felt nothing but cold purpose. She stirred as he rose, offering a sleepy smile that had once meant everything to him. Early meeting? She asked. Something like that. Mitchell leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture of farewell she didn't understand. I'll be working late tonight. Don't wait up. By 6 a.m., Mitchell was in his study, calling Phil West, his former Marine Corps buddy who now ran a private security firm in the city. Phil owed Mitchell several favors from their Fallujah days. Mitch. Christ, it's early. What's the situation? I need a safe house, untraceable communication equipment, and a favor I can't explain over the phone. Phil's voice sharpened immediately. How bad? Family's compromised. I need to disappear for a few days. Say no more. I've got a cabin upstate. Off the grid, fully stocked. I'll text you the coordinates. Phil. This stays between us. If anyone comes asking, law enforcement, private investigators, anyone, you've never heard from me. Copy that. Mitch. Watch your 6 out there. Mitchell's next call was to Annette Hunter, his attorney and former romantic interest from his pre-Jennifer days. Annette had never married, focusing instead on building one of the most feared legal practices in the state. Mitchell. This is unexpected. Annette, I need legal advice off the record. If someone were planning my murder, what would be the most effective way to protect my assets and ensure the perpetrators received nothing? A long pause. Jesus. Mitchell. Are you serious? Deadly serious. My office. 1 hour. Come alone and use the rear entrance. Mitchell spent the next 30 minutes transferring funds from joint accounts to his personal accounts, changing passwords, and accessing his gun safe. The Glock 19 felt familiar in his hands, an old friend from darker days. At Annette's office, he laid out the situation with military precision. Her face grew progressively paler as he detailed Tyler's confession and the planned accident. "We need to contact the police immediately," she said. "No." Mitchell's voice was granite. "Tyler's confession would be worthless. He's a minor, and his testimony alone wouldn't be enough for conviction. They'd be arrested, make bail, and disappear before trial. Jennifer knows about the offshore accounts I've been setting up for retirement. She could access enough money to vanish. Then what do you propose?" "I'm going to let them think they've succeeded." Annette leaned back in her chair. "Elaborate." "Tonight, Mitchell Becker dies in what appears to be a carjacking gone wrong. My truck will be found burned out in the industrial district. Blood evidence will suggest I was killed and my body dumped elsewhere. And in reality, I'll be hunting them." Mitchell's smile was predatory. "I want you to set up a new will, effective immediately. Everything goes to charity, St. Jude's, Wounded Warrior Project, organizations Jennifer despises. She gets nothing." "Mitchell, this is insane. You're talking about faking your own death." "I'm talking about survival. They think they're playing chess with a suburban car dealer. They're about to learn they're facing someone who spent 8 years conducting psychological operations against people who invented the game." Annette was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" "Legal coverage for what comes next. And an alibi if anyone asks where I've been today." That afternoon, Mitchell executed phase 1 of his plan. He visited each of his dealerships, making sure to be seen by multiple witnesses. At the downtown location, he made a show of staying late, working in his office until 9 p.m. when most of the staff had gone home. At 9:15, he called Tyler from his office phone. "Dad, Mom said you were working late. Change of plans. I'm heading home now, taking the usual route." Mitchell paused. "Tyler, I want you to know, despite everything, I love you. Remember that." "Dad, you're scaring me." "What's?" Mitchell hung up. By 9:30, he was in his truck, following his normal route home. But instead of continuing straight at the industrial district intersection, he turned left into the maze of abandoned warehouses. Phil West was waiting with a second vehicle and a duffel bag. "Blood packets in the cab, remote incendiary device in the engine compartment," Phil reported. "This thing will burn hot and fast once triggered." "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." Mitchell climbed out of his truck, activating the blood packets and spreading the contents across the driver's seat and dashboard. "Give me 10 minutes to clear the area." As Mitchell drove away in Phil's nondescript sedan, he triggered the incendiary device. In his rearview mirror, his truck erupted in flames that would burn for hours, destroying any chance of forensic analysis. By 11 p.m., he was at Phil's cabin, monitoring police scanners and local news feeds. The story broke at midnight. Prominent businessman Mitchell Becker's vehicle found burned in industrial district. Blood evidence suggests foul play. Police investigating possible carjacking. At 12:30 a.m., Mitchell's burner phone, a different one from Tyler's cache, rang. "Is it done?" Jennifer's voice, breathless with excitement. "Clean as a whistle," came Brian Hagan's reply. "Truck's still burning. Cops think it was a random carjacking. No body means they'll spend weeks searching the river." "And the police won't connect it to us?" "How could they? I was in Atlantic City all night. Got hotel receipts and casino surveillance to prove it. Your alibi's solid too." "What about Tyler?" "Kid doesn't know the details. Far as he's concerned, his dad got carjacked by random criminals. He's grieving, but he'll get over it." Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. "God, I can't believe it's finally over. When can we access the accounts?" "Death certificate takes about a week. Then we cash out and disappear. Costa Rica, here we come." As the call ended, Mitchell felt the last vestiges of his old life die. His wife was celebrating his murder. His son was complicit in his death. Everything he'd built, Everything he'd believed in had been a lie. But Mitchell Becker wasn't dead. And the people who thought they'd killed him were about to learn what true terror felt like. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 4. Gathering Intelligence. For 3 days, the world believed Mitchell Becker was dead. Local news ran the story. His dealerships released statements expressing shock and grief, and funeral arrangements were being planned. From his cabin hideout, Mitchell watched it all with cold detachment, using surveillance equipment Phil had provided to monitor his own memorial service. Jennifer played the grieving widow perfectly. Dressed in black, dabbing her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences from friends and business associates. Tyler stood beside her, genuinely shaken by what he believed was his father's actual death. The boy's guilt was written across his face. He thought his information had led to a real murder. But Mitchell was learning things that made his blood boil. Through directional microphones and hidden cameras Phil had installed around his house, he discovered the full scope of their betrayal. The life insurance alone is $2 million, Jennifer told Brian during one of their phone conversations. Plus the business valuations, the house, the investment accounts. We're looking at close to $8 million total. And the kid. Tyler gets his college fund and that's it. Once we're in Costa Rica, he can figure out his own life. Brian's laughter was harsh. Cold. Baby. I like that about you. Mitchell also learned about Brian's background through Phil's contacts. Brian Hagan was a former cop turned private investigator who'd lost his license for evidence tampering. He now worked as a fixer for wealthy clients who needed problems to disappear. Permanently. Jennifer had met him 6 months ago when she'd hired him to investigate Mitchell's business dealings, looking for grounds for a profitable divorce. Instead, they discovered something more lucrative. Mitchell was worth more dead than divorced. The extent of Tyler's involvement became clearer through recorded conversations. The boy had been feeding them information for months, believing he was helping his mother gather evidence for divorce proceedings. He had no idea about the murder plot until the final week, and by then he was too terrified and complicit to back out. But Mitchell's most important discovery came from Wayne Tuttle, Brian's criminal associate who'd helped orchestrate the fake carjacking. Wayne was a cocaine addict with gambling debts, and Brian had been using him for muscle work. Through careful surveillance, Mitchell learned that Wayne was supposed to have been the one to kill Mitchell, but Brian had decided to handle it personally to avoid loose ends. Wayne didn't know this. He thought Brian had chickened out and hired professional killers instead. This paranoia made Wayne a potential weak link in their operation. On the 4th day, Mitchell began his counteroffensive. First, he anonymously contacted Wayne's parole officer, providing photographic evidence of Wayne's drug use and association with known felons. Wayne was arrested within hours, creating stress fractures in Brian's organization. Next, Mitchell began haunting Jennifer and Brian psychologically. Using his knowledge of their routines, he started leaving subtle signs that someone was watching them. A coffee cup moved on Jennifer's kitchen table while she was showering. Brian's car alarm triggered repeatedly during the night. Fresh flowers appeared on Mitchell's grave, despite the cemetery being locked after hours. The psychological pressure began to show. Jennifer started drinking more, jumping at shadows. Brian installed additional security cameras around his apartment, but Mitchell's military training allowed him to avoid detection while still maintaining surveillance. Meanwhile, Mitchell was building his team. Through Annette's legal network, he contacted Monica Dickinson, Jennifer's sister. Monica had always suspected Jennifer was cheating but had no proof. When Annette approached her with evidence of the affair and murder plot, Monica was horrified but willing to help. Jennifer always thought she was smarter than everyone else, Monica told Mitchell during a secure meeting at Annette's office. Even as kids, she'd manipulate situations to get what she wanted. But murder. I never imagined she'd go that far. Monica agreed to act as Mitchell's inside source, feeding Jennifer false information while reporting back on her sister's state of mind and future plans. Mitchell's most valuable recruit was Roman Minor, a former Special Forces operative who now worked private security. Roman had been referred by Phil, and his particular skill set was exactly what Mitchell needed for the next phase of his plan. "You want me to kidnap them?" Roman asked during their briefing. Not kidnap. Relocate. There's a difference. Mitchell spread out architectural blueprints of an abandoned warehouse he'd purchased through shell companies. I want them isolated but not suspicious. They need to come willingly. What's the timeline? Soon. Jennifer's getting nervous, and Brian's starting to suspect Wayne might talk. They'll want to accelerate their exit strategy. As if summoned by Mitchell's words, his surveillance equipment picked up a panicked phone call between Jennifer and Brian. Wayne's lawyer is asking questions, Brian said. Wants to know about Wayne's whereabouts the night your husband died. We need to move up our timeline. How soon? Tomorrow night. I've got a boat arranged. We hit the bank accounts in the morning, transfer everything to offshore accounts, then we're on a plane to Costa Rica by midnight. What about the funeral? People will expect me to. Fuck the funeral. Dead husband, grieving widow, whatever. We'll be sipping mojitos while they're lowering an empty coffin. Mitchell smiled grimly as he listened. Perfect. They were going to run, which meant they'd be isolated and vulnerable during the transition. It was time to spring his trap. He made one final call to Tyler's burner phone, knowing the boy had been agonizing over his father's death for days. Tyler, this is your dad. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Tyler finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Dad. But you're dead. I saw the news. The truck. I'm very much alive, son. And we need to talk. Chapter 5. The trap is set. Tyler's hands shook as he drove to the location Mitchell had specified. A parking garage downtown, level 3, section C. His father was supposed to be dead, burned alive in his truck 4 days ago. Yet the voice on the phone had been unmistakably Mitchell's, calm and controlled as always. Mitchell waited in the shadows between two concrete pillars, watching Tyler arrive in his beat-up Honda. The boy looked haggard, eyes red from crying, guilt etched in every line of his face. Good. Guilt would make him malleable. Dad. Tyler's voice echoed in the empty garage. Mitchell stepped into the light. Tyler stumbled backward, his face cycling through shock, relief, and terror. You're alive. Jesus Christ, you're alive. Tyler started toward him, then stopped. But the truck, the blood, how? Sit down, Tyler. Mitchell gestured to a concrete ledge. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, Mitchell laid out everything he knew. Tyler's face went progressively paler as he learned about Brian's criminal background, the murder plot, and Jennifer's true intentions. She was going to kill you too, Mitchell concluded. After they got the money. Brian doesn't leave witnesses. Tyler buried his face in his hands. I never wanted this. I thought it was just about divorce. About Mom getting a fair settlement. But you knew about the murder plan. You admitted it to me. Only at the very end. Brian pulled me aside the night before and said there'd been a change of plans. He said it would look like an accident, that you wouldn't suffer. I was going to warn you, I swear, but then I got scared and you chose self-preservation over your father's life. The words hit Tyler like physical blows. He looked up at Mitchell with desperate eyes. I know I can't undo what I did. But I'll do anything to make it right. Anything. Mitchell studied his adopted son carefully. The boy was broken, genuinely remorseful, and completely under Mitchell's control. Perfect. Here's what's going to happen, Mitchell said. Jennifer and Brian are planning to run tomorrow night. They think I'm dead, which gives us an advantage. You're going to help me spring a trap. What kind of trap? The kind that ensures they pay for what they've done. Mitchell's voice was ice cold. But Tyler, understand this. Your participation doesn't earn you forgiveness. It might earn you survival. Tyler nodded miserably. What do you need me to do? Mitchell explained the plan. Tomorrow afternoon, Tyler would tell Jennifer that he'd been contacted by someone claiming to have information about Mitchell's murder. A mysterious caller who'd witnessed the carjacking and wanted to sell the information to the highest bidder, the police or Jennifer's family. You'll arrange a meeting for tomorrow night at the Old Riverside Warehouse District. Tell her this witness wants $50,000 for silence, and he'll only deal with family members, meaning her and you. What if she brings Brian? She will. Brian won't let her go alone to meet a potential witness. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Tyler looked confused. But Dad, if they're planning to leave town tomorrow night anyway, why would they care about a witness? Mitchell smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because I'm going to make them believe that this witness has information that could bring them down even in Costa Rica. Information about their offshore accounts, their new identities, their escape route. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jennifer and Brian would come to the meeting location believing they were dealing with an opportunistic witness they could either buy off or eliminate. Instead, they'd find themselves walking into a carefully orchestrated confrontation with a man they thought was dead. What happens to them after? Tyler asked quietly. That depends on how cooperative they are. Tyler swallowed hard. And what happens to me? Mitchell stood, looking down at the boy who'd helped plan his murder. You'll live. But Tyler, after tomorrow night, we're done. I'll make sure you have enough money to finish college and start your life, but you'll do it far away from me. We're not family anymore. The words devastated Tyler more than any physical punishment could have. He started to cry, great heaving sobs that echoed through the garage. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so fucking sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back trust, son. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Mitchell turned to leave. Make the call to your mother. Set up the meeting. And Tyler? If you double-cross me again, Roman Minor will be the last person you ever see. That night, Mitchell finalized his preparations. The warehouse he'd chosen was perfect, isolated, with multiple entrance and exit points, and completely soundproof. Roman had equipped it with lights, cameras, and restraint systems. Phil had provided additional security equipment and would be on standby as backup. Annette had prepared legal documents transferring all of Mitchell's assets to an irrevocable trust, with specific instructions for how Jennifer and Brian would be dealt with legally after tomorrow night's confrontation. Most importantly, Mitchell had prepared psychologically for what was coming. He'd spent years in combat zones, but this was different. This was personal. This was family. At dawn, he received the call he'd been waiting for. Dad. Tyler's voice was shaky. It's done. I called Mom an hour ago. She's bringing Brian to the meeting tonight at 10 p.m. They're scared, really scared. Brian's been asking lots of questions about what this witness might know. Good. Tyler. After tonight, disappear for a while. Go stay with a friend, take a trip, whatever. Don't be anywhere Jennifer or Brian might look for you, because they'll be angry when they realize it was a trap. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Because they won't be looking for anyone ever again. The line went dead, leaving Tyler alone with the growing realization that his father, the man he'd helped betray, was about to do something that would change all their lives forever. As night fell over the city, Mitchell Becker prepared for the final act of his deadly game. Tomorrow, the world would learn what happened when someone tried to kill a man who'd spent his life learning how to survive. Chapter 6. The First Cut. Jennifer spent the day pacing Brian's apartment like a caged animal, chain-smoking and checking her phone obsessively. The mysterious witness Tyler had described sounded dangerous, someone who claimed to have seen Brian's face during the carjacking and knew details only the killer would know. We should just leave now, she insisted for the 10th time. Forget the meeting, forget the witness. We have enough money to disappear. Brian was methodically cleaning his .45 caliber pistol, the one he'd intended to use on Mitchell before deciding the fake carjacking would look more convincing. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? No way. We deal with this witness tonight, permanently, then we're free. What if it's a trap? Set by who? Your husband's dead, kid thinks it was random criminals, and nobody else knows anything. Brian slammed the clip into his gun. We go in hard and fast. 50 grand to shut him up, or a bullet if he gets greedy. Jennifer watched him load extra ammunition into his jacket pockets. Brian, maybe we should think about this. Baby, I've been thinking about it all day. This witness is the only loose end. Once he's handled, we're home free. Brian pulled Jennifer close, kissing her roughly. Trust me. After tonight, we start our new life with clean hands. At 9:30 p.m., they drove to the Riverside Warehouse District in Brian's modified SUV. The area was industrial wasteland, abandoned buildings, empty lots, and no witnesses for miles. Perfect for making problems disappear. Jennifer's nervousness increased as they navigated the dark streets. Tyler said Building 47. Are you sure this is right? GPS says we're close. Brian checked his rearview mirror for the 20th time. Remember, we go in together, keep the meeting short, and don't let this guy get comfortable. They found Building 47 at the end of a dead-end street. It was a 3-story brick structure with most of its windows boarded up. A single side door was propped open, spilling yellow light into the darkness. Cozy, Brian muttered, parking 20 feet from the entrance. You stay behind me, and keep your hand on the backup gun I gave you. They approached the building cautiously. Inside, they found a small reception area with concrete floors and fluorescent lights humming overhead. A handwritten sign read, Conference Room, 2nd floor, follow arrows. This is getting weird, Jennifer whispered. Stay calm. Desperate people do weird things. Brian led the way up a narrow staircase, following spray-painted arrows on the walls. The 2nd floor opened into a large room that had once been a factory floor. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle under harsh industrial lighting. In the center sat a card table with a manila envelope and a bottle of water. Hello, Brian called out. We're here for the meeting. Please take seats, came a voice from speakers mounted in the ceiling. Mr. Hagan, Mrs. Weeks, thank you for coming. Jennifer and Brian exchanged glances. The voice was electronically distorted, impossible to identify. Who the hell are you? Brian demanded, his hand moving toward his gun. Someone who knows exactly what you did 4 nights ago. Please, sit. Let's discuss business like civilized people. Reluctantly, they took chairs near the table. Brian kept his gun partially drawn, scanning the shadows for threats. You claim to have witnessed my husband's murder, Jennifer said, trying to project confidence. What exactly did you see? I saw Brian Hagan set fire to Mitchell Becker's truck after spreading blood packets inside to simulate a murder scene. The voice was calm, matter of fact. I saw him dispose of incendiary evidence in a dumpster 3 blocks away. I saw him make a phone call to you, Jennifer, confirming that the job was done. The color drained from both their faces. This witness knew details that hadn't been released to police or media. What do you want? Brian asked through gritted teeth. Originally, $50,000 for my silence. But the more I've learned about you both, the more interesting this situation has become. Meaning what? Meaning Mitchell Becker isn't actually dead, and you two are about to discover what happens when you try to kill someone smarter than you are. The lights suddenly cut out, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Jennifer screamed as the sound of multiple footsteps echoed around them. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. 3 men in tactical gear had appeared in the room, faces covered, weapons drawn. But it was the 4th figure that made Jennifer's blood freeze. Mitchell Becker stepped out of the shadows, very much alive, wearing body armor and carrying an assault rifle with military precision. Hello, darling, he said to Jennifer, his voice quiet and deadly. Miss me. Brian's gun was halfway out of his holster when the nearest tactical operator put him down with a taser. He convulsed on the concrete floor, his weapon skittering away. Jennifer tried to run but found the exits blocked. She backed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "You're dead. I saw the truck. The blood." "Oh, there was blood," Mitchell said conversationally. "Just not mine. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with some pig's blood and a basic understanding of forensic science." Brian groaned as the electrical shock wore off. The tactical operators zip-tied his hands behind his back and hauled him into a chair. "Tyler told you everything, didn't he?" Jennifer's voice was hoarse with terror. "Tyler told me about your affair, your murder plot, and your escape plans. He also told me about the information he'd been feeding you for months." Mitchell circled them slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "But what Tyler didn't know, what you didn't know, is that I've been aware of your activities for quite some time." "That's impossible." "Jennifer, I spent 8 years conducting intelligence operations in active war zones. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my own family was conducting surveillance on me?" Mitchell laughed, but the sound held no humor. "I let you gather your intelligence. I let you make your plans. I even let you think you'd succeeded." Brian struggled against his restraints. "You crazy bastard. This is kidnapping. When the cops find out." "The cops think I'm dead, Brian. They're not looking for me." Mitchell leaned down until his face was inches from Brian's. "And when they do find my body, which they will eventually, the forensic evidence will show that Mitchell Becker was murdered by Brian Hagan and Jennifer Weeks in a botched robbery." "What the hell does that mean?" Mitchell smiled, and for the first time in her life, Jennifer understood what real evil looked like. "It means, Brian, that you're going to confess to killing me. You're going to provide details only the killer would know. You're going to lead police to where you hid my body." Mitchell stood, his voice growing colder. "And then you're going to die in a tragic accident before you can stand trial." The room fell silent except for the hum of the industrial lighting. Jennifer and Brian stared at Mitchell, finally understanding that they weren't dealing with a suburban car dealer anymore. They were facing someone who'd spent years learning how to break people professionally. "Of course," Mitchell continued, "if you prefer the alternative, we can discuss that too." "What alternative?" Jennifer whispered. "You can tell me everything, every detail of your plan, every person involved, every dollar you've stolen or plan to steal. You can sign confessions taking full responsibility for attempting to murder me. And you can accept the consequences I've designed for you." "And if we do that?" Mitchell's smile widened. "Then instead of dying quickly, you'll live long enough to truly understand what you've done to yourselves." As the implications sank in, Jennifer began to cry. Brian renewed his struggles against the zip ties, but the tactical operators, Roman Miner and his team, were professionals. The game had taken a new turn, and Mitchell Becker was no longer playing defense. Chapter 7. The Confessions. Mitchell had learned interrogation techniques from the best Marine Corps intelligence specialists who'd broken hardened terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jennifer and Brian were pampered suburbanites who'd never faced real pressure in their lives. They would break within hours. The warehouse had been prepared methodically. Separate holding areas for each prisoner, recording equipment to document their confessions, and soundproofing that would contain any screams. Roman Miner and his team maintained professional distance, following Mitchell's orders with military precision. Brian was first. Stripped to his underwear and secured to a metal chair in a concrete room lit by a single bulb, he tried to maintain his defiance for exactly 43 minutes. "I want a lawyer," he repeated for the dozenth time. "This is illegal detention. When the FBI finds out—" "Brian," Mitchell interrupted calmly, "the FBI thinks I'm dead. The local police think I'm dead. My own wife celebrated my murder. So far as the world is concerned, you succeeded in killing me." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Do you understand what that means?" "It means you're fucking insane." "It means," Mitchell continued as if Brian hadn't spoken, "that legally speaking, I don't exist anymore. Dead men don't kidnap people. Dead men don't commit crimes." Which raises an interesting question. What happens to someone who gets killed by a dead man? The psychological pressure was relentless. Mitchell had studied Brian's profile extensively. Former corrupt cop, gambling addiction, daddy issues from an abusive childhood. Every weakness was a pressure point to exploit. Jennifer's in the next room, you know, Mitchell mentioned casually an hour later. Roman's explaining to her that she has a choice. Cooperate fully, or watch what happens to the man she betrayed her family for. She won't break, Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Brian, she's been cheating on me for 6 months and helped plan my murder. What exactly makes you think she's loyal to anyone but herself? As if summoned, Jennifer's voice echoed through speakers in Brian's room. Sobbing, terrified, begging for mercy. Please, I'll tell you everything. Just don't hurt me. Please, Mitchell, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Brian's face went white. That's not. She wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Betray you to save herself. Mitchell chuckled. Brian, she betrayed a husband of 22 years and a son she raised from childhood. What makes you special? The psychological warfare continued for hours. Mitchell alternated between reasonable conversation and cold intimidation, slowly breaking down Brian's mental defenses. He played recordings of Jennifer's confessions, actually Roman interrogating an empty room while Jennifer was unconscious in another cell, making Brian believe his lover had already turned on him. By dawn, Brian was broken. I'll tell you whatever you want to know, he whispered, his voice hoarse from shouting denials. Just make it stop. Tell me about the murder plot. From the beginning. Brian's confession was comprehensive and damning. Jennifer had hired him 6 months ago to investigate Mitchell's business dealings, hoping to find evidence of affairs or financial impropriety for divorce proceedings. Instead, they'd begun an affair, and Jennifer had realized she'd get more money as a widow than a divorcee. She said Mitchell was worth $8 million dead, maybe half that in a divorce, Brian sobbed. She wanted him gone permanently. And Tyler's involvement. The kid was our inside source. Jennifer convinced him it was just for divorce research, schedules, meetings, business information. He had no idea about the murder plan until the last week. When did he learn about the murder? 3 days before. I pulled him aside and told him there'd been a change of plans. Said his dad would have an accident, but wouldn't suffer. Kid freaked out, but by then he was too deep to back out. And after my death, Jennifer inherits everything. We liquidate the assets, transfer the money offshore, and disappear to Costa Rica. Tyler gets his college fund and that's it. We leave him behind. Mitchell recorded every word, documenting the conspiracy in excruciating detail. Brian's confession would be legally worthless in court, obtained under duress and by someone who was legally dead, but Mitchell wasn't planning on using the courts. Jennifer's interrogation was different. Where Brian responded to intimidation, Jennifer crumbled under guilt manipulation. Mitchell had raised Tyler from age 3. Jennifer had given birth to him and watched him grow up. Motherhood was her psychological weak point. He's 18 years old, Jennifer, Mitchell said quietly as she sat in her cell, still wearing the black dress from his memorial service. Tyler's barely an adult, and you used him to help plan his father's murder. What kind of mother does that? I never wanted Tyler involved, she wept. That was Brian's idea. I told him we should leave Tyler out of it. But you didn't stop it. I couldn't. Brian said Tyler was already in too deep. If we backed out, he'd go to the police, and we'd all go to prison. So you decided killing me was the better option? Jennifer's breakdown was complete and devastating. 22 years of marriage, 2 decades of shared memories, and she'd thrown it all away for a criminal with a gambling addiction and a violence fetish. I fell out of love with you years ago, she sobbed. You were never home, always working, always focused on business. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. So you decided to murder me rather than ask for a divorce? Brian said a divorce would take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. He said there was a better way. And Tyler. Tyler was supposed to go to college and move on with his life. We were going to set up a trust fund for him before we left the country. Set up with money stolen from his murdered father. Jennifer couldn't respond to that. The moral horror of what she'd done was finally penetrating her self-justification. By the second day, Mitchell had complete confessions from both conspirators, documented evidence of their plot, and detailed information about their planned escape route. More importantly, he'd broken them psychologically to the point where they were completely under his control. But confession was only the beginning of Mitchell's plan. Here's what happens next, he told them during their first joint session since capture. They sat chained to opposite walls of the main room, forced to look at each other while Mitchell explained their fate. You're going to disappear. Brian, your parole officer will be told you violated terms and fled the state. Jennifer, your friends and family will learn you suffered a mental breakdown after my death and checked yourself into a private psychiatric facility. For how long? Jennifer whispered. For the rest of your lives, Mitchell replied matter-of-factly. You wanted me dead so you could enjoy $8 million in Costa Rica. Instead, you're going to spend whatever time you have left learning what real hell feels like. You can't keep us here forever, Brian protested weakly. Someone will come looking. Who? Brian, you're an ex-cop with no family and a criminal record. Your only friend was Wayne Tuttle, who's back in prison. Jennifer, you've been telling everyone for weeks that you need time alone to grieve. Monica thinks you're visiting a grief counselor in another state. Mitchell walked between them, his voice calm and conversational. You see, I've had months to plan this while you thought you were planning my death. Every detail has been considered. Every loose end has been tied up. What about Tyler? Jennifer asked desperately. Tyler made his choice when he chose to help you instead of warn me. He's alive, he has money for college, and he knows never to cross me again. That's more mercy than either of you deserve. Mitchell paused in front of them, his expression unreadable. You wanted to know what happens next? Tomorrow, we begin your education in consequences. You'll learn what it feels like to be completely helpless. To have your fate controlled by someone who sees you as less than human. To know that every breath you take exists only at the pleasure of someone you tried to destroy. He turned toward the exit, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. You'll have plenty of time to think about how this could have been avoided. All you had to do was not try to murder me. As Mitchell left them alone in the darkness, Jennifer and Brian faced the growing realization that their nightmare was just beginning. They'd succeeded in killing Mitchell Becker, the car dealer, the suburban husband, the adoptive father. But they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A predator who'd spent years learning how to destroy enemies without mercy or conscience. And this predator had all the time in the world to make them pay. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 weeks into their captivity, Jennifer and Brian had been reduced to shells of their former selves. Mitchell's psychological torture was methodical and relentless, calculated to break them completely without leaving physical evidence that could later be questioned. They were kept in separate cells most of the time, allowed together only during education sessions, where Mitchell forced them to confront the full scope of their betrayal. He made them watch recordings of Tyler's breakdown when he learned about the murder plot. He played audio of their own phone calls, letting them hear their casual discussions about disposing of Mitchell's body and celebrating their inheritance. Did you know Jennifer laughed when you told her I was dead? Mitchell asked Brian during one session. Actual laughter, she said. God, I can't believe it's finally over. Brian stared at Jennifer with hollow eyes. You laughed. Brian, She also asked when she could access the life insurance money, Mitchell continued. Seems she was more interested in the payout schedule than whether I'd suffered. The psychological warfare was designed to turn them against each other, and it was working. After weeks of stress, sleep deprivation, and constant fear, their relationship was disintegrating. This is all your fault, Brian snarled at Jennifer during one joint session. I was making good money as a private investigator. You're the one who wanted your husband dead. You were the one who said murder was better than divorce. You convinced me we could get away with it. Because you were crying about how miserable you were, how trapped you felt. I was trying to help you. Help me. You were helping yourself to $8 million. Mitchell watched their mutual destruction with clinical interest. In psychological warfare, the most effective technique was often making enemies destroy each other rather than destroying them directly. But psychological torture was only the first phase of Mitchell's justice. Phase 2 began when he brought in Jerry Acosta, a former cartel enforcer who now worked private contracts for people who could afford his specialized services. Jerry's job wasn't to inflict physical damage. It was to demonstrate how easily physical damage could be inflicted. See, the thing about breaking fingers, Jerry explained to Jennifer while she watched from her chains, is that it's not really about the pain. It's about the sound. That little pop when the bone snaps. Most people break mentally the first time they hear it. He held up Brian's hand, gently flexing the fingers while Brian whimpered. But we're not going to break your fingers today, Jerry continued conversationally. Today we're just going to talk about what it would feel like if we did. The psychological impact was devastating. Jennifer and Brian were forced to contemplate physical torture without actually experiencing it, which often proved more effective than actual violence. The imagination could conjure horrors worse than reality. Please, Jennifer sobbed. We confessed. We told you everything. What more do you want? What I want, Mitchell said quietly, is for you to understand what you stole from me. 22 years of marriage. 18 years of fatherhood. A family I trusted with my life. We can't give that back. No, you can't. But you can pay for it. Mitchell nodded to Jerry, who produced a small medical kit. Dr. Acosta here is going to help you understand pain the way I understood pain when I realized my family had betrayed me. But instead of physical torture, Jerry administered sedatives that left Jennifer and Brian conscious but helpless, aware of their surroundings but unable to resist or fight back. Paralytic agents, Mitchell explained as they lay motionless on medical tables. You can see, hear, and feel everything, but you can't move a muscle. It's how I felt when I discovered your plot, aware of the danger but powerless to stop what was happening to my life. For 12 hours, they lay paralyzed while Mitchell systematically destroyed everything they'd planned for their future. He showed them documents proving their offshore accounts had been frozen and seized. He played recordings of Costa Rican authorities being alerted to watch for them at airports and border crossings. Your new life is gone, he told them as the drugs wore off. Your escape route is blown. Your money is confiscated. You have nothing left except what I choose to give you. The final phase of Mitchell's justice was the most brutal. Complete isolation and abandonment. Here's what happens now, he told them during their last joint session. You're going to be separated permanently. Jennifer, you'll be transferred to a private facility where you'll live under the name Sarah Collins, a mentally disturbed woman with no family or friends. You'll receive basic care, food, shelter, medical attention, but you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that everyone you ever loved believes you're dead. Jennifer started screaming, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls. Brian, you'll be relocated to a compound in rural Mexico where you'll work off your debts to some very unforgiving people. Your gambling addiction made you vulnerable to loan sharks, and I've purchased your obligations from them. You'll spend however long you live repaying money you never actually borrowed. This is insane, Brian gasped. You can't just make people disappear. I'm not making you disappear, Mitchell corrected. I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. A new life far away from here. You just won't be together, you won't have any money, and you'll spend every day wishing you'd never heard my name. Roman Miner and his team prepared the transfers with military efficiency. Jennifer was sedated and loaded into a medical transport vehicle that would take her to a private psychiatric facility in Montana, a place that specialized in patients with no outside contacts or family visitors. Brian was handed over to Francisco Holden, a human trafficker who ran labor camps in remote areas of Mexico. Francisco's organization had a reputation for keeping workers alive just long enough to be profitable. As the vehicles drove away into the night, Mitchell stood alone in the empty warehouse. 3 weeks of planning and execution had resulted in perfect justice, his enemies destroyed, his betrayal avenged, and his new identity secured. Tyler had been relocated to a college on the opposite coast, with enough money to finish his education but clear instructions never to contact Mitchell again. The boy would live, but he'd live knowing he'd helped plan his father's murder and lost his family forever. Mitchell Becker was officially dead, his murder solved, his killers vanished without a trace. But the man who'd planned and executed this operation was very much alive, ready to build a new life far from the suburban paradise that had concealed such deadly betrayal. As dawn broke over the industrial district, Mitchell felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. His enemies were destroyed, his justice was complete, and his future was his own. The hunt was over. The prey had been consumed, and the predator was free to disappear into whatever life he chose to build next. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months later, Samuel Cross sat in a beachfront cafe in Belize, reading about the final closure of the Mitchell Becker murder case. Local police had declared Jennifer Weeks and Brian Hagan dead in absentia, victims of what appeared to be cartel violence near the Mexican border. Their bodies had never been found, but enough evidence had been discovered to convince authorities they'd been killed while attempting to flee the country with stolen money. Samuel Cross was 46 years old, a former military contractor who'd purchased a small resort on the Caribbean coast after inheriting money from a dead relative nobody had ever heard of. He was tanned, fit, and spoke fluent Spanish with the local staff. To his neighbors, he was a quiet American who kept to himself but was generous with local charities and always paid his bills in cash. The transformation from Mitchell Becker to Samuel Cross had been planned for years, long before Jennifer's betrayal had made it necessary. False identities were something Mitchell had learned to construct during his intelligence career, and maintaining them required constant attention to detail. Every aspect of Samuel's life was carefully curated. The resort provided legitimate income that explained his lifestyle. His background story, former military contractor seeking peaceful retirement, explained his skills and resources without raising questions. His relationship with local authorities was cordial but distant, the kind maintained by wealthy expatriates who wanted privacy above all else. The Belize operation was just one of 3 identities Mitchell had established over the years. He had similar setups in Colombia and Thailand, each with their own financial networks and documentation. If Samuel Cross ever became compromised, he could disappear and emerge somewhere else within 48 hours. But more than survival, the new identity represented freedom. For the first time in decades, Mitchell lived without the weight of betrayal or the burden of trust. He answered to no one, owed nothing to anyone, and could make decisions based purely on his own interests. The resort was profitable and growing. Mitchell had discovered he enjoyed the hospitality business. It allowed him to observe human nature without emotional investment. Guests came and went, staff worked and were paid, and nobody expected anything more complicated than efficient service and comfortable accommodations. The only shadow on his new life was the occasional news about Tyler. Through carefully maintained surveillance networks, Mitchell learned that his former son was struggling in college. Poor grades, drinking problems, and difficulty maintaining relationships. The boy was clearly suffering from guilt and trauma over his role in the murder plot. Mitchell felt nothing about Tyler's struggles. The young man had made his choices and would live with the consequences. Sympathy was a luxury Mitchell could no longer afford. The larger world continued spinning without Mitchell Becker. His dealerships had been sold to pay estate taxes and legal fees, with the proceeds going to the charities he'd specified in his final will. His house in Millbrook Hills had been purchased by a young family who had no idea of its history. The suburban paradise he'd built with Jennifer had been completely erased. Sometimes, late at night when the resort was quiet and the Caribbean waves lapped against the shore, Mitchell wondered if he missed his old life. The answer was always the same. He missed the illusion of his old life, but not the reality. The reality had been built on lies, sustained by betrayal, and destined for destruction. Better to live alone and trust no one than to build another house of cards that could be toppled by the people closest to him. On this particular evening, as Samuel Cross finished his dinner and prepared for another peaceful night in paradise, He received an encrypted message on a phone that only 3 people in the world knew existed. The message was from a net hunter, Tyler Lawson, found dead in his dorm room. Apparent suicide. Thought you should know. Mitchell stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Tyler had chosen his path 18 months ago when he decided to help murder his father rather than warn him. Everything that happened afterward, the psychological torture, the family destruction, the guilt and isolation that had ultimately killed him, was simply the natural consequence of that choice. Mitchell poured himself a glass of expensive rum and walked out onto the beach. The stars above the Caribbean were brilliant and uncountable, a vast universe where his small dramas meant nothing. Somewhere in that darkness, Jennifer was living as a mental patient with no memory of her real identity, thanks to the experimental drug treatments she'd been receiving. Brian was dead in a Mexican labor camp, killed by guards after attempting to escape for the 3rd time. The boy who'd called him Dad for 18 years was dead by his own hand, unable to live with what he'd done. Mitchell felt nothing about any of it. These weren't tragedies. They were problems that had been solved permanently. He finished his rum and walked back toward the resort, already planning tomorrow's activities. A group of German tourists were arriving in the morning, and he needed to ensure their rooms were properly prepared. The restaurant's new chef wanted to discuss expanding the dinner menu. The dive boat needed maintenance before next week's excursions. Simple problems with simple solutions. A life without betrayal, without family, without trust. A life where Mitchell Becker could finally rest, because the man he'd become had learned the most important lesson of all. The only person who could never betray you was yourself. As he locked the resort office and headed to his private quarters, Samuel Cross smiled. Tomorrow would bring new guests, new challenges, and new opportunities. But it would also bring the certainty that nobody in his life had the power to destroy him. He'd killed Mitchell Becker more thoroughly than Jennifer and Brian ever could have. And from those ashes, he'd built something stronger,